Hey, welcome back to Long Run Costs in this video. Alright, so we're going to learn how a firm chooses, that's right, it's a choice, their average total cost curve upon which to operate. Alright, so in the long run, a firm's fixed costs become a variable that it can choose. So again, thinking back to past videos, what we're talking about here is the difference between the short run and the long run. In the short run, a firm has some costs which are taken as fixed, meaning that they cannot change those in the short run. Things like their rent for their building or their office space, the machinery, the capital that they are using. Those can be fixed decisions, fixed variables. However, in the long run, they become variable because those contracts end, and they are able to now choose to find new office space, to find new buildings, machinery, capital, all that stuff. So in the long run, all costs are variable. That is your difference between the short and the long run. Short run has fixed costs. Long run, all costs are variable. With that in mind, it's important to know that there is a trade-off between having higher fixed costs and lower variable costs, regardless of how much you're producing. So what that means is you can choose to have higher fixed costs, so more machinery, more capital, and as a result, when you produce, you will have lower variable costs as a result because you spent so much on machinery and whatnot. You have lower variable costs, so you'll need fewer labor, workers, that kind of thing. On the other hand, you choose to go with a smaller amount of fixed costs, less capital, less machinery, less tools. You're going to need more labor when you start producing. So there's a trade-off. You have to decide higher fixed costs with lower variable or lower fixed with higher variable. All right, and this slide, don't worry about copying the numbers. You don't need to know that. This is an example of that decision between low fixed costs and high fixed costs. So on the left-hand side, you have a firm choosing to have low fixed costs. On the right-hand side, it shows what happens if they choose to have high fixed costs. Now, what I want you to notice is look at first the low fixed cost columns, okay? Look at their high variable costs. So again, since they chose to have low fixed, they will have higher variable costs. And so they increase quite rapidly. You notice them increasing straight away from the beginning. The first one quadruples and it gets bigger and bigger from there. High fixed costs, on the other hand, their variable costs are lower, and you can see that they are consistently lower and become more and more so as you go. So they are about half of what the high variable costs are. So what's happening here is you have that decision to make. That's one thing to keep in mind. But the next is actually, how does this affect average total cost? So I highlighted the number 3, so the quantity 3, and then the average total cost for both the low fixed cost option and the high fixed cost option. And what you should hopefully notice here is the idea that when the quantity, the output is low, well, it's better to have low fixed costs. So the ATC is 72 for the low fixed cost firm, whereas the high fixed, it's $90. So in this case, having with a lower output, it's better to have low fixed costs. When our output increases, however, and it goes to that quantity of 9, now notice what happens. The ATC is $120 for the low fixed cost firm, but it's only $78 for the high fixed cost firm. Again, what's happening here is this is about the spreading effect. So with the high fixed costs, the larger the output, the greater the quantity that you have to spread those high fixed costs over. And they're using lower variable costs, so it's increasing the variable costs at a smaller rate. So what happens here is as you produce more and more, it doesn't affect or increase the ATC as much as it does for the low fixed cost firm. So if you kind of just look at the ATC columns, for low fixed costs, it's minimized at the quantity of 3. And then their ATC starts going up 75, 81, 90, etc. starts moving up pretty rapidly. For the high fixed costs, their ATC is minimized on the 6th level of output, quantity of output, and then only slowly increase from there. So this decision of whether to have high or low fixed costs, it's directly related to how much does the firm expect to produce. If you expect to produce higher quantities, then you'd want higher fixed costs. If you expect to have lower quantities, then you'd expect or want to have lower fixed costs. And finally, the long run average total cost curve. So you have the definition, shows the relationship between output and ATC. Again, this is in the long run. So this is when fixed cost has been chosen to minimize average total cost for each level of output. All right, I know this is a confusing looking curve. here. And so I don't want you to draw this right here and now. There'll be another video about the long run average total cost curve, but it's the one that darker red, or the thicker red line, that's basically going around all of the other SRATCs, short run average total cost curves. What's happening here is, because remember, the company gets to choose what combination of fixed and variable inputs they want to have. So, or variable costs, I'm sorry, fixed costs and variable costs. So essentially they're choosing what SRATC curve to operate. So this one has an example, this has 5 short run average total cost curves. In reality, this would be an infinite amount, because it would be every possible combination of variable inputs and fixed inputs. And so what you do, the company is going to decide what is the best one of these SRATCs to operate on. And what's going to leave them with is a choice that is this U-shaped long run average total cost curve. Now there's a lot of other terms on here that are, can be distracting. That's what the next video will deal with, so I don't want you to focus on that too much. But notice that in the first third of the LRATC, it's decreasing. As you produce more, long run average total cost is decreasing. Then the middle third, it's the same. You have a flat part of this curve, and where it's not changing as you produce more, the average total cost remains the same. Then the last third, it starts to increase. As you produce more, the average total cost increases. So that's just something to keep in mind, and the next video is going to get into why that is and all these different terms to explain that. So until next time, this has been a LaMoney production.